Nigeria's government says it's transforming agriculture from a development program to a business. Short-term targets include the end of rice imports by 2015, and rating agency Agusto and Co has released a report that spotlights opportunities and challenges in crop production in Nigeria. And joining me for a discussion around that report is Rita Emoefe. She's head of research at Agusto and Co. Thank you so much, Rita. It's great to speak to you. And earlier this year, I made the point that this year will be the year we'll be hearing a lot about agric, because it's clearly a big thing for the government right now. So let's talk a bit about your thoughts on the opportunities you're seeing in that space. I know that your report is focused mainly on cassava, oil palm, and cocoa. Of course, we have a rich history in cocoa production in Nigeria, but of course, we've fallen back a little bit over the last few years.
Well, I'd like to start from just talking a bit about cassava. Nigeria is actually the largest producer of cassava in the world. So there's a lot of opportunity there. But even though we produce so much, we do very little in terms of exporting. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in that area, particularly given one of the government's policies, which is the 10% cassava inclusion policy.
Right.
So it means that they're trying to encourage bakers and flour millers to actually incorporate more cassava in producing bread.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well. And then there's also opportunity in the area of processing cassava. Actually getting the water out and exporting it as cassava pellets or cassava chips.
Right, of course. And of course, I think I've read that Nigeria should be exporting about 2 million metric tons of cassava chips to China. So big opportunity there. But let's talk a bit about cocoa and where you see that headed in terms of policy and the opportunity. Of course, Nigeria is, I think, the third largest producer in West Africa. So where do you think we are likely to be given the changes we're seeing in policy right now?
Well, I think for cocoa, one thing government has done, as part of their transformation agenda, is actually to distribute improved varieties of the seedlings to some of the farmers. And I think they did something in November 2012. Right. Now, we don't expect significantly much from that in another 1-2 years, because it takes, quite a long time for, to produce the seeds. So we're looking at maybe 2015. It is, the seeds that they've actually given out, they're reputed to actually maybe increase yield by 100%. Right. So if we're doing about 250,000 metric tons, we're looking at maybe 500,000 metric tons by 2015. Right. So it's not right away. Okay,
let's touch oil palm briefly. Oil palm, we do have some companies that are into that, even on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. We have Presco, we have Okomo Oil. Your thoughts on the opportunities for investors who are looking to invest in those companies in particular, and what you're seeing them doing right now?
I think the oil palm segment has done pretty well in the last few years, and that's actually because in 2007 they actually started planting new seedlings. Right. So we're just seeing all that coming to fruition now. So they've increased yield, and everything's looking good. Now the key risk in that area is actually policy. So there's a 35% import duty on imported palm oil. Right. So that's the key risk area. Now with the transformation agenda, what it means is that I think government is going to be listening to people like the Okomos and the Presco, because they want to develop agriculture. So it doesn't pay the government to actually kill this kind of industries. So it is likely that those policies will stay and keep that segment looking good in the near term.
Okay, then let's talk about the challenges. I mean, you just mentioned one with respect to Okomo, or rather to the oil palm producers. Broadly speaking, I mean, one of the thoughts that comes to my mind is the investment in research. And investment in infrastructure. Those are things that, to a large extent, would slow down the development we're seeing in agriculture. But your thoughts on this? I
think you're right. You're spot on. For big companies like a Presco and a Como, they can actually afford to invest in R&D. So they're pretty okay. But for the smaller, farmers in the small scale, medium-sized scale farmers, they still don't have, the resources to invest so much in R&D, and then they have to depend on the government in terms of researching new seedling varieties, and better yielding crops. Right. So I think that's a key area.
Do you expect to see huge investments in agric? From your reading of the agricultural transformation agenda that is being pursued right now, huge targets have been set. For instance, in rice, there's a target that by 2015 we should stop importing rice. But your broad expectations for how the government is pursuing this transformation, and do you think we're going to see the big money coming into Nigeria?
I think the government is doing well. In terms of the policies point, they're actually focusing on the key inputs. So it's talking about land, seedlings, and and the inputs as well. So we're talking on things like fertilizer. I think they're doing pretty well. They've done a few things in those areas. For me, my thoughts are, can they sustain or maintain this momentum?
Right.
And if they do, I think, you know, Agric is going to be a lot bigger than it is.
And for the smaller players, I imagine that many of them are type of people that would use your reports beyond of course, the large players as well. Your thoughts on the opportunities for smaller players that want to go into Agric right now? A lot of people saying that banks are no longer as interesting as they used to be. A lot of people are looking outside banking and looking into agriculture these days.
Yes, I think the opportunities are bound for, you know, different cadres within, so the small to the large. I think the key thing is funding for some of the small players, because agriculture requires long-term commitment.
And cheap funding as well.
Yes. Yes, cheap, affordable, I mean good funding, right. Yes.
So the reason I make that point is because, of course, it takes a while for many of these crops to be harvested.
Yes.
I mean, something like cocoa, for instance, I don't think it's something
3 years, yeah.
Exactly.
2-3 years, yeah. It does take a while. So they need consistent funding, and they need cheap funding as well.
But the reforms we're seeing in that space right now, with, you know, some of the intervention funds, what the central bank is doing, NERSL is of course a major player in the whole development for Agric. Do you think that funding is coming to the sector?
I think it is, maybe not directly to the farmers, not as much as we'd like to see going to the farmers, maybe the processors, you know. So I think it's coming in. Probably we'll see a lot more coming in. But I think for now, I don't think, I could say maybe about 51% of one of the funds we've looked at has actually gone to the processors or not the farmers directly.
Right. And what about private equity investors coming into this space? Do you think it's attractive? Do you anticipate a lot more money coming this way?
Maybe going into the, you know, already structured companies in that space.
Right.
Not you know, the small players.
Okay.